Okay, I promise I'm wearing a shirt. It's just off the shoulder. It's a sweater and it's nude colored, so I'm sorry. Hey, what's up everybody? It's Amaya. So today's video is going to be a foundation routine on this look, obviously right here. I'm going to be showing you how I do my foundation, primer, concealer, powder, blush, bronzer, highlighter, all of that sorts of good stuff. I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite products as well as just how I like to actually apply the makeup to get the most long-lasting, natural-looking base possible, whether it's medium coverage, full coverage, or light coverage. I wear makeup almost every single day and usually for a long period of the day, usually from the morning to the late afternoon and night. So I need things that are going to last a long time, that are going to look good, and that I'm not going to have to really like blot or touch up throughout the day because I don't got time for that. So yeah, this is probably the best tips and tricks that I have found over my many years of trying products and trying different routines and tips and tricks and all sorts of good stuff. So yes, that's what we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, let's hop right in. Okay guys, so we are going to get right in with the face. I already have my eyes done and I have some mascara on and my eyebrows done. So you can do this obviously in whatever order you want. The very first thing we're going to start out with, of course, is a nice, clean, moisturized face. This is one of the most important things. Your foundation and all of your face makeup will not look as good if you do not have a nice, clean, moisturized base. Don't skip on the skincare on good foundation days. No pun intended. If your foundation is not strong, everything on top of it is going to kind of fall apart, just like a building, right? So if you do not have a strong base, everything else kind of falls apart. So we don't want that. So make sure that you have a nice, clean, moisturized face. Okay, so next we are going to move into primers, and primers are a very personal thing, but I find that this combination works on pretty much anybody. Using a pore filling primer and then some sort of other primer, whether it be hydrating, illuminating, mattifying, what have you. So for my pore filling primer today, I'm going to be using the e.l.f. Poreless Putty Primer. Almost forgot the name. Poreless Putty Primer. This is an awesome one from the drugstore and just an awesome primer in general. Just comes in a little dish right here. You could scrape it out with a little tool if you wanted to. I just use my finger. And I'm just going to rub that between my fingers and press it into any areas where I have more pores, like the center of my face, my forehead, between my brows and my chin. Put some on the mustache as well. I also really like the Cover FX blurring primer, but if you're looking for something on a budget, you just don't want to spend that much money, this one works just as good. Okay, so like I said, for your other primer, you just have to go with your needs. If you need something mattifying, if you need something illuminating, hydrating, whatever. Today I'm going to be using the Wet n Wild Dewy Face Primer. This is one of my favorite ones. It's just an illuminating primer. It doesn't really do much else than just make your skin look nice and glowy, which is kind of what I want today. If I'm having a day where I want my makeup to last a really long time, I will use a more long-lasting primer. If I feel like I'm having a dry skin day, I'll use a more moisturizing primer. It just kind of changes depending on my mood and my skin needs. So whatever works for you. This is a great illuminating primer because it's not like moisturizing. So for those of you that have like oily skin, it's not going to make your skin feel greasy, just glowy. Okay, so normally I would put this on and let it set while I did my eyes. However, today we don't have that luxury because I did my eyes first. So we're just gonna fast forward and with like some TV magic pretend that it sat in for like 10-15 minutes. If you do your eyes second, I would recommend putting your primer on before you start your makeup and just kind of like fiddling around for like 10-15 minutes just to let everything sink in, let your skin kind of warm up those primers, work together with them, and let them really like adhere to your face. It's a great tip and will make your makeup last a lot longer. Okay, so next for the actual foundation, I really like using a long wearing and almost slightly mattifying foundation, especially if I'm going to be wearing my makeup all day, which is most days. I put it on in the morning and take it off sometime in the late afternoon or even night. So I want this stuff to last and not have to blot often. So today I'm going to be using the L'Oreal Infallible 24-Hour Fresh Wear Foundation and mixing it with the Wet n Wild Photo Focus Foundation, just because my shade's kind of in between these two guys right here. I really like mixing my foundations as well. I like mixing a more like mattifying foundation with a more hydrating foundation. You just kind of get that nice perfect blend. You can make the dewy foundation last longer, and you can make the long-lasting foundation not be as mattifying, or sometimes they can be heavy or just kind of suck the life out of your skin. Okay, and then the next big tip that I have is to cut your foundation with either a moisturizer or some sort of primer. So for this, I will usually use just a nice light moisturizer, just something nice and basic, or I will use some sort of like hydrating primer, because I feel like you get that long wearing effect of the primer while also getting the nice hydration. This just kind of helps break up the foundation a little bit, not in like a breaky uppy way, like kind of helps to like tone down the foundation so it's not as full coverage, it's not as heavy, and it looks more natural on your skin, and it just kind of wears better in my opinion. I have combo skin and this works. People with dry skin love this tip, and people with oily skin, you guys can use this tip too. It just depends on the primer or moisturizer that you mix in and how much of it you put in. Obviously, the more you put in, the sheerer your foundation is going to be. So today I'm going to be using the Major Hangover RX. It's just the Hangover RX primer from Too Faced in this giant bottle. But I really like this primer because it's long lasting but also super moisturizing. So I just put like a half a pump to a full pump of that into my foundation, depending on how full coverage I want it. And then I just mix those together. Okay, and then I just start swiping the foundation onto my face. Now, I am personally a sponge girl when it comes to blending in my foundation. I do also like brushes. I will usually use a stipple brush, but sponges are just my go-to. I go through phases, but in the end I always come back to sponges. So that's what I like to use. You can use whatever you like though. I just feel like they really press the makeup into the skin, make it look very natural. Like the pores in the sponge kind of mimic the pores in your face, so it doesn't look too cakey or unnatural. And of course, you always want to make sure you apply down your neck. You do not want that nice line of demarcation. And this is a pretty well-known tip now than it was, you know, a couple years back, but I still always remind people to do it because, you know, sometimes you're in a hurry, you forget, but trust me, just taking a couple seconds and getting it down there, worth it. So after I'm done kind of applying the foundation, I like to go back and just kind of press it in again with my sponge, and this will just kind of work it all in and make sure it's really pressed in there and not just sitting on top of the skin, which is another benefit that I like to do with a sponge that you can't do with a brush. Concealer. Moving on. I'm going to be using the ColourPop No Filter Concealer today. This is in the shade Light 18. I just really like the ColourPop concealer because I feel like it's kind of a little bit of everything. It's very quick drying, which I like. It's matte, but not too cakey matte. Like, it's not super drying, and it's not full coverage, but it's not light coverage either. It's just like this nice in-between concealer that I feel like is actually quite versatile and that a lot of different people can use. I've used it on a lot of different people and it works really good, and I like it on me no matter what my kind of skin is. I also like using it when I'm not wearing any foundation as just kind of like a concealer slash foundation combo. So I'm just putting this kind of in the normal areas: forehead, chin, under the eyes, obviously down the nose. Someone with a nice rectangular, angular face, I like to kind of make my face look a little bit smaller, so that's why I'm applying my concealer down in this triangle form. You can look up charts online, there's videos online for your face shape, what's going to work best on how to apply your concealer. This is personally how I like to do it, and I don't apply it directly under the eyes because that's going to cause a lot of creasing. I also like to let my concealer kind of set down for a minute or two. This is a Jackie Aina tip, and basically all it does is it makes your foundation stay in place easier because it's not as liquidy, it's not as emollient, it's not moving around as much. It's also going to increase the coverage while using less concealer because you're letting it kind of dry down and stick down. ColourPop concealer dries very fast though, so be careful of that. Alright, so we are ready now. Concealer's kind of set down. I'm just going to take my sponge and start to blend it out. And as far as blending goes, I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to kind of dab, not wipe. I like to blend it out, not going directly underneath my eye, and then just taking whatever excess is on my sponge and just kind of tapping it there. Also like sharpening up my eyeshadow line, all that sorts of good stuff. But I don't like to put it directly under there originally, because like I said, that's going to make it crease more, it's going to make it look really heavy, so I just like to blend it out till it's almost all gone, and then just put a little bit under there. And then after I'm all done, I just like to flip my sponge back over to the side that I used for my foundation and just kind of pat everything in, make sure that we're all nice and blended, we don't have any weird lines anywhere, and there we are. Okay, so now powder, of course, have to set it down with some powder. I don't care how dry you are, you're going to need a little bit of powder, otherwise this stuff is just going to slip and slide all around. So I'm using the RCMA No Color Powder as always. It's my favorite one. It's in this little container. This is not the original container. It comes in like an oregano bottle. This is the powder that I use on literally everybody, clients, myself. It's just like the best powder I've ever used, and it doesn't flash back, it doesn't have a lot of color to it because it's like the no color powder, and it just is great for everyday and for event makeup. So that's what I like to do. I do use a separate sponge for my powder, however. I don't use the same one. I don't like to mix my creams and powders, so I do grab a second sponge, and then I just kind of tap underneath the eye to get out any creases, and then go ahead and just start pressing that powder in. You could also use a brush for this, of course, but I really like using the sponge. I feel as though, like I said, it just gets that product to kind of press into the skin and last longer and look more natural. It's just my preferred method. So my nose tends to get very oily and to eat makeup, so I just kind of like to put a line down there and let it sit for a minute, just like a couple minutes, not really baking it, just kind of letting it adhere a little bit. If I have a super full coverage day, I will bake my entire nose just to like let it soak in if I really need it to stay, but today was just kind of a normal day, so we don't really need to do that. I just like to put the line down and then just tap it away. I'm also sure to set my neck because you don't want that foundation moving around or creasing or getting any weird. Not that there's enough down there that it's even gonna matter too much, but I do like to just take precautions and set it down there. Sometimes it can feel sticky. As you may have noticed, I don't set my entire face. I just kind of let whatever excess powder is on my sponge kind of go to those areas. It's just my preferred method. I don't feel like I need to set my entire face. If you're someone who gets very oily though and you want to set your entire face, by all means be my guest. I just feel as though these foundations are not super tacky or sticky, and I don't have an issue with anything slip and slide and sticking around. So alright, so now for bronzer, of course, beloved Physicians Formula Butter Bronzer. It's just the best. It is what it is. So just using my Real Techniques blush brush, which is one of my favorite bronzer brushes. I just really like the shape of it. It's nice and fluffy. I feel like it's just the perfect size for my face. And I'm just going to start to kind of swirl it in this cheek area right here. Like the last 4 years, my bronzer routine hasn't really changed much. So if you've watched any of my other videos where I apply bronzer, it's going to look pretty much the same. Probably the same products. And then of course, just putting some of that on my big old forehead. I always just like to apply a light layer down the neck and kind of under the jaw. Not too much because you will look like you have a line of demarcation even though if you don't. So I just like to bronze up the neck a little bit. I just like to take a little bit and throw it on the nose. Easy peasy. You don't want to go overboard with the bronzer. That is when trouble happens. Alright, so one of my biggest tips for highlighter and blush is to do your highlighter before your blush. And this kind of goes against all like beauty guru rules. But if you do your highlighter first, then you put your blush over it, it blends your highlighter, blush, and bronzer in a way that's way different than if you were to do blush and then highlighter. It makes your highlighter look much more natural and not as much of like a stripe on your cheek. So if you have that issue where you feel like you kind of have that nice stripe, this will help so much. So today I'm using my Maybelline Broken highlighter. This is their strobe light in Day Glow number 2. So I love this guy, especially for days where I'm going to be inside and not like taking photos or anything like that. Just a nice natural everyday, because it gives you a nice glow without looking too intense and glittery. Just a really nice everyday highlighter. Still pungent enough to like look nice and glowy, but it's not super glittery or, you know, too glowy where it's going to look super unnatural for an everyday look. I also like to kind of bring it down a little bit on the apples of my cheeks, not too much because you do have pores there, so you don't want to highlight those too much, but I just bring it down slightly into the cheek area. Just find that it adds a nice like natural glow. Alright, and then I am going to go into my Flower Beauty Shimmer and Strobe highlighting palette. And I'm going to take that first shade right here. I always like to use 2 highlighters, one that's more closer to my skin tone and then one that's a little bit more like poppy. And I'll just kind of dust that right on the tops of the cheekbones, where I want the highlight to be the most concentrated. Just looks really nice in real life, in photos, all the above. This is a Morphe M501 brush, by the way, if I did not mention. Okay, so this may look a little weird because we don't have any blush kind of blending everything in, but let's change that. I'm going to go in with the Burt's Bees blush in Shy Pink, just like this. I'm going to take my Luxie 514, but this is a blush brush, I think. Yes, it is. So I'm just going to apply that where I would apply my blush, just over top of that bronzer and highlighter. I like to kind of put a nice little smile and just kind of go the apples of my cheeks and work my way back. I don't dab it on the front, obviously, but I do like to get it on the front of my face a little bit because, like I said, I have a more square rectangular face and I kind of want to slim it out. And so by doing this, it kind of adds, one, a youthful look, and then two, it just kind of helps narrow everything in my face. As you can see, I have a nice glow to my face, but it's not like a stripe of highlighter. I will go back with my highlighter brush with no additional product and just blend that out and make sure it's all nice and good. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is just finish up my lower lash line, and then we are going to set the face. So I'm just gonna go in. I have the BH Cosmetics Zodiac palette on my eye today, so I'm just gonna go in real quick and do this. Okie dokie, so I just went in, finished that up, and now we're going to set the face with a setting spray. My favorite one that I use every time is the Morphe, what is it called? Mist and Set? Fixing, I don't know, the Morphe one. This one. It's my favorite because I had like the aerosol spray on it. However, I just ran out of that. So today we are going to be using what's left of this Catrice Prime and Fine Multi-Talent Fixing Spray, which I don't hate. I just don't like the spray on it. So I'm going to be using this. And then I will go in with my powder sponge and just lightly dab my face. Sometimes you'll get little water drops or spurts, so you want to kind of get those in, and by pressing the foundation and everything into your skin, it's just gonna make everything last a little bit longer. If you press that setting spray in, it's gonna make everything last and lock everything in. So I just like to go in with a little bit of MAC Fix Plus or some sort of hydrating spray just to make my makeup look a little bit more lived in. I just like the hydration it gives to my face, and I like the way that it makes my makeup look. Alrighty, I'm just going to go put on some lower lash mascara, change, fix my hair, put on some lipstick, and I will be right back. This is our finished look. This is how the foundation looks. I just really love this method of doing foundation and face makeup. I just feel like it looks so nice. You can use it for a full coverage day or a natural day. It just, all these tips and techniques can work for so many different skin types and so many different preferences when it comes to foundation. Full coverage, medium coverage, light coverage, or anything in between. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Please give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Also hit that bell for notifications, and yeah, I hope to see you in my next video. Mwah.